I am really, 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 really excited to talk about this movie. I'm so jazzed to talk about this movie.
I I'm so excited to talk about this movie. Ah man, this movie was such a yeah. I'm struggling to even think of words how I want to describe this movie because I enjoyed it so much. Like it was amazing, breathtaking. Just one of the best experiences I've had watching a movie. And after I watched this movie, I was like, what have I just watched? What was this brilliant piece of work that they've done here? This is such a great character analysis. Like it's a kind of movie that if you love movies, you have to watch this movie. It does so many things so well. But let's just start with general questions, man. Go for it.
No, I can't agree with you more. It was one of those that, still being somebody who is, thoroughly steeped in cinema of all kinds, right? But definitely watching more Hollywood movies just because of where I live in America and my access and my exposure to them being greater. I was even telling you right before we sat down to record, like, thank you for introducing me to this world of movies, because this movie, Drishyam 2, and Mukundi Uni Associates have all blown me away. Consistently blown me away, and they've been wonderful and indistinguishable from some of my favorite Hollywood pictures. And this one in particular, like you just said, hit me right in the cinema gut. It did everything right for me. It underpinned its themes. All the actors were acting like they meant it. The music was wonderful. The scenery was beautiful. Everyone felt like everything was earned. All the motivations were clear. You felt all the tension. You felt any of the minute release. It just, from almost frame one, I was enchanted. Yeah. I was entranced. And then all of the tragedy that comes along with a story like this strikes, and you're still so smitten with it that you can't help but love it. But then you do struggle to find the right words, just saying like, correct. I had the best time watching all of those people die. Which is exactly right. Which is such a weird thing. But it was really just a thrilling and wonderful experience for me. It was like, if anybody can tell you a story you know and love, like when I read kids' books to my daughter, right? And you hear somebody else read it in a way that you hadn't considered before, and you're like, wow, they did a great thing there. That was awesome. Knowing Macbeth since I was a kid, knowing other movie adaptations of that story, but then watching this felt like somebody serving me my favorite dish with a different spice, and it was so tasty.
Yeah, man. That's so well put. It's like, I think the part you said about from the first frame, I think some movies you come in and you just sort of watch and they take their time to get into it. You're kind of like, all right, cool. Let me see how it goes. And it's at a certain point where you're like, all right, now I'm going to really start focusing. Especially when you watch movies at home, the cinema experience is a bit different because you're kind of forced to zone in straight away. But
yeah, I think at home, other people kind of like get you jazzed up too,
Correct. Yeah, that's right. So there's a bit of that. But this movie, I think, like, I put it on and I was like, whoa, what am I seeing here? Just from the music that starts going, the way it's shot. Obviously, there's the whole COVID side of things, which is also there, which reminds us of a time. I'm looking back on it now, which is like, whoa, that was, that happened. Yeah. It kind of just popped up like, whoa, okay. But basically it was like, it took me maybe 2 minutes to really just pop up and be like, I'm going to watch this movie and I'm not going to pause it. Like, this movie is not going to be paused. I'm not going to stop for anything. Whatever I had to do, I paused it, did it just then so I could watch it in one complete watching. Because it was just that entrancing. Yeah, a lot of the stuff you said, man, like, it's just, everything in this movie is so precise, it feels like, from the acting to the writing is obviously phenomenal to like what they've done here. But yeah, the music comes at the right times, the score comes in at the right times, the way they've shot the scenes, the tension is so strong in not just the performances, but like the way they shoot everything in close quarters. Everything's almost claustrophobic because it's in the house. There's so much in this movie to unpack and so much in this movie that I just liked. But overall, like, what I take away from this movie is that feeling you have at the end. Basically, not just because there's some movies where you see the end and you're like, whoa, that twist at the end blew me away, like Drishyam. Or like, something happened in the movie that it's like you remember that part of that movie. But this movie is like a experience. It's like the feeling. You remember from the first frame to the last frame what sort of happened, and it hits you like, whoa. I'm not going to forget this movie, and I can't tell you what exactly I'm not going to forget because I'm going to remember all of it. That's how good this movie was. This was, one of the best movies I've seen in a while, man. That's a big thing to say considering how many great movies we've watched lately.
Well, I can't agree with you more though, and to piggyback on your point about like remembering everything. Knowing that this movie is an adaptation of Macbeth and knowing that there was a lot of parlance, I went into it with some expectations. But like I said, that first frame really sucked me in. It's, as you watch that delivery driver come to the plantation and he delivers that gun, like just the way everything is filmed, like, an eerie sense starts to build. And nothing paid off that eerie sense more than watching the father pulling himself up on those bars. Like, everything in the movie, is going to happen. And then the tension that builds is how it's going to deliver it to you, right? Like, you know, people are going to die. If it clearly said right in the titles, this is inspired by Macbeth, somebody's going to die.
Yes.
But you also then have to see what is the main character, in this case, Joji, trying to achieve? Who is he trying to supplant? Who is he trying to usurp? And just that simple shot of the father pulling himself up on those rings and just immediately being this imposing, almost titanic and monolithic figure that you can't even touch. And nobody could. Not even after he almost dies and is rendered almost completely useless as a human. He still strangles his son. Like, that one shot, though, was where I knew. I was like, okay, if you deliver that shot and you make it matter, then everything else that follows is going to matter as well. To Joji, who we're experiencing this story from, right? Mm-hmm. It was stark, man. Like, that was the Jaws moment of just seeing the fin. Just that man, that old, still pulling himself up and doing that stuff. That hit me right here.
Definitely.
Wild.
No, that scene was, man. It's like the king of the castle right there, right? As soon as he walks in, you're right, because as soon as it says inspired by Macbeth, I was already like, wow, okay, because I mean, I do quite like the Macbeth story anyway. In general, it's been told 100 times, and obviously reading the books while studying back in the day, like I think we both had. It's something that just reminds me of sometimes. And obviously, there's some really dark tones and dark themes in Macbeth, as is reflected in this movie as well. But they're really sort of deep and nuanced, and you got to really think through those. So I was almost like, I'm ready for this challenge of this movie and what it's going to try to do. I'm ready for trying to interpret what they're trying to do with this movie. It was already in my head because of that one line. And you're right, exactly then when he sort of props up and he's just on the no words, nothing. The shot is maybe 5 seconds. Like, it's not like it's a long, we don't zoom into his face. It's not extended. It's seen from the background and you just see how big and tough he is. And that carries on consistently throughout. I think the next scene is him like almost before he pulls a pipe out, he puts his knee onto Joji's chest, like, I can dominate you like anytime I want. Might just be just the physical appearance as well. Like, Joji is very sort of, slim and very kind of almost skinny, frail, kind of like.
Yeah, that was the other thing. So the juxtaposition between the father and Joji was like a perfect cinematic choice, because I don't know, other than like Peter Pettigrew in the Harry Potter films, if anyone has ever been more spot on cast to be like a meek, mousy man. Because I've seen him, like, you just did that other trailer reaction where it's the same actor in something else, and just a small tweak of the physicality makes you carry yourself entirely differently. And he doesn't look that way in that movie. But in this one, every little weird, slimy, squirmy twist he makes with his body makes you hate and love the character at the exact same time. And I was sucked into the way he played him.
No, he was, oh my God. So I think this is the third movie of his I think I've seen, Fahadh Faasil. This guy is honestly, he is turning into one of my favorite actors. Like, his command over his emotions are so strong. He has that really good eerie kind of creepy kind of face that he can make sometimes. And I've seen it do him. He's done that more in other movies than this one. but just his command on like being sort of like kind of victim mode, like he sort of did in this movie really well, or trying to be that slimy kind of character. He seems to fit that so well, and he was fantastic, man. To carry a performance like this, so demanding. Because you're right, like movies like this again, shot in such close circumstances, we're zooming into his face a lot of the time, right? So those slight little tweaks that he's making with his face, they're all conveying different emotions. He has so much control over that, like when to sort of be, mischievous, or when to be sort of, evil in his plans, when to be sort of the victim. They're all subtle differences in his face, but he's able to convey them so well. And of course, you back that up with the other phenomenal cast in this one, including the dad, who was, my God, his acting when he was like, had a stroke. You couldn't tell that he didn't have a stroke.
Oh, that's
how well he acted. It was so fantastic.
Just the start
on him,
like his hand coming up. Like they even mentioned at one point, like he can't see. So he just waits for people to get close to him, or he waits for Joji to get close to him in that scene and just snatches at his neck like, because he has maybe 10 minutes of screen time, but in that 10 minutes, he is proven to be imposing. He's proven to be authoritarian. You absolutely see why this is his property. This is what he started. This is why he should have agency over everything.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that he speaks with his other two sons, it just all circles in on that. Like, nobody does anything without dad's say so. Yeah. And the oldest brother, Jomon, right?
Mm-hmm. Jomon. Yeah.
Jomon, like him being the physically imposing nature of his father, and then the middle brother kind of being the more calculated nature of the father, and then Joji just being the waste. The waste, and then Bincy being the mind. It was such a perfect kind of explosion of the pieces of the father that had not necessarily coalesced in any one of the kids. And to see Joji try to systematically worm his way in and figure out the weaknesses of them was like stunning. It was so cool to see. Lethal, but cool.
Definitely. No, definitely. It was a fantastic. I think this movie has absolutely no comedy in it. I would say it's like completely dedicated to its tone, like that serious, dark, grim scenes. But one scene that did sort of crack me up, probably not intentionally. I don't know if you remember. There's a scene where he's like squeezing a stress ball.
Oh yeah,
and he's looking so menacing while doing this. I was like, wow, man, that's the most intense squeezing of a stress ball I have ever seen. Like he's like working out with it. I was like, this itself is scary. Whatever he does is so imposing. There's like that scene where he's like, they ask him like, can you get a signature? And he does it perfectly. And you're like, wow. In like 2 days, he's basically become completely better. Nothing's affected him at all. So yeah, casting was spot on. I thought, they all just were fantastic. Bincy, who I think was basically Lady Macbeth, from sort of the adaptation, did a fantastic job of like prodding and like being the mind. Like, in Macbeth, I think it's a bit more, because she's actually with Macbeth. In this, they kind of switched it around where she's like the sister-in-law, not dark, husband, wife kind of thing. But, she is sort of the mind. That's the inspiration, I'd say, behind that. As you said, like she sort of plots and thinks a little bit more than the Joji, especially, who sort of acts more. But I think that's a good segue into this movie and its plot, man. Because I think for me, like the way I would describe this is like, it's a perfect, like, it's a perfect breakdown of a character into that sort of criminal sort of mind. Because he doesn't start like this. He starts as somebody who has sinister intentions, but we see how bad it can get over time. And the allure of power, I guess, of money, whatever it is, you want to sort of put in this world, what he needs. That's so well. We walked that journey so well. I think it's just fantastically done. Like that's the takeaway I got basically from Joji's character until the end. Like you just see that path that they take. It is dark. It is just dire, as I said before, but it is so fascinating to watch because it's so well done. Like it's just spot on. I just thought it was just the pacing was perfect. It's not too fast at one time. Doesn't drag at any times. It's almost just like this is going along at the right pace. I think there's a moment when he has the friend, Dr. Felix or whoever he is, the mediator between them, he basically, there's no premonition in this like there is like in Macbeth, like the witches come and tell him something, but he does say something like, he only has a couple of weeks left, and that plants in his head, and that's the one where it's like, that's now going to corrupt me. Like, that's going to make me turn into what I'm going to do. So, man, what do you think about how this movie all played out? Like, I'm sure you absolutely loved it, but I want to hear from you. Like, how much did you love this?
I was utterly sucked into every single moment of it. So after we get through all of, the establishing stuff where we know, okay, this is the king, this is the youngest son, and obviously the movie is called Joji, so this is our Macbeth, right? Yeah. So after we get to that moment where we realize that he's in the hospital and he's only got a couple days to live and you should get his affairs in order, and Joji is, going out with Poppy and he's getting drones and he's doing whatever he wanted to do and he's going to sell the horse and he's doing the things his dad never let him do. The moment his dad comes back and you start that slippery slope, it's so authentically and so quickly and so genuinely, especially in like the time of COVID, really showed you like, I can be the king of my own domain. Because at that time in COVID and isolation and kind of quarantine protocols, lockdowns, if your whole world was going to be this space, you wanted to have some agency in it. And Joji had no agency in the space that he lived in. He just has that meek little bedroom, and he only has one underling, which is his nephew. Yeah. And he gets that taste. He gets that taste of power, and then he wants it back. And the way that he subtly does everything with the father, to the literal explosionary nature of how he has to take out his brother, to the final strange but amazing, very small confrontation where he's trying to blackmail his brother, telling him like, hey, I did do this. You know for a fact I did this. Vincey was in on it too. I'm going to ruin all of us if you don't stand with me. And his brother just tells him, I won't. The payoff for me in this movie is Joji's face when he realizes that he's done, where he just hits that smile. And he walks away into the room and has the gun that you are certain isn't going to matter. The air gun, which to me is also the most tragic moment of the movie, in that Poppy purchases the gun that ultimately kills his father. Imagine that. Imagine knowing that you were responsible for the thing that ultimately took your father's life. But as he walks away with that airsoft gun and he has that smile on his face, it was like none of these tragedies, none of this Shakespeare tragedies are, heartwarming. But as a true cinema fan, I felt like I had just seen something masterful on screen. And the way that he carried that emotionality, because it's just a house. Like we keep saying, it's just a house and it's just a compound, largely.
That's right.
And the way that he walks out of that room after having the confrontation with his middle brother to the bedroom and then hits that note. You like just this wormy man who believes he's owed something, and he takes it in the worst possible ways that you can, and then tries to take his own life and even fails at that. Like, they made Joji himself the tragedy and not necessarily the circumstances around him the tragedy. It was his life itself was a tragedy because he could not help himself. And because he couldn't do that, he actively tried to kill everyone around him. Spectacular, dire, but gorgeous, lovely, and one of the best movies I've seen in recent times.
No, exactly right, man. It's definitely is a tragedy. The tragedy of Macbeth, right? The tragedy of Joji. Like, it's essentially a pretty bad tragedy. And you're right, at the end, it's even like he cannot escape from this. It's like, it puts you in a weird position because you don't feel sympathetic for him. Like, he's not a likable character at all. Like, the movie's shot through his lens, but we're never on his side at all. In fact, I don't know whose side we're on in this movie. You're not really rooting for anybody, I guess. Like, you want the father to get better, but he's not shown as a good father or a good king. He's just very, domineering in his sort of sense. So it puts you in a strange position where you're not really following anyone's exact journey for the purpose of like wanting them to survive or wanting them to, have a better life or anything like that. I guess the only character you're really feeling sympathetic towards is, you're right, is probably Poppy, who's sort of in the background, and is kind of responsible for the takedown of, at least not his immediate family, but his extended family are basically all gone to the one device that he got, because that gun comes up all the time. And you would think at the start, it's just like, okay, it's going to be there, but like, not, it's an air gun for one. It's not like a, assault rifle or like a pistol. It's, it's an air gun. So, but they're using that to basically, just commit murder after murder. So it's, I think 2 deaths died. There are 2 people that died from that air gun and the other one's poisoned. The other part I really loved was just, again, Fahadh Faasil's like reactions to when things are going to start going south, and you just see how he reacts to those. When they say like, we have to get an autopsy for the father, and he's like, no, we're not. No, we're not going to get it. And then when they try and prod and find out what actually happened to Jemon, the older brother, he gets even more paranoid. So this feeling of paranoia is just all over him because he knows he's in the wrong. But his ability to lie, to antagonize, as you said, with the middle brother in the end, and even I don't think he has that much of a beef with the priest, the priest that keeps coming in.
Oh yeah.
He doesn't have that much of an issue with him. It's more the older brother, because he can see through the priest and being like, look, if it wasn't for me, the father would have died because you weren't doing right. So the way they set up the sort of dynamics between the brothers is so good, because he's seen as like amongst the brothers, Jamun, he's sort of the one that's sort of the most, I guess, put together, I guess, in a way. Like he's the one that sort of has it all together, even though he's gone through the divorce and all that stuff with his family. In terms of like, his work, he seems to be doing better. And then Jason seems like he's doing better in terms of, his name is Jason? Yeah, Jason's doing better in terms of his family life, because he's got that set up. But again, then the third brother, complete waste, Joji. So the dynamics are all set up so really well, and that comes to play throughout the entire movie. It's like Jemon figures out that, you've been lying this whole time and you're trying to blame somebody. But like, even when he's blaming the other worker, the way he just like, the faces he makes when he's been made, he's like kind of like, oh shit, what do I do now? Like, how do I
a master of that scene? Like he was an absolute master of the like, oh shit, I've been caught. But you can't believe the system. You can't believe the system. You can't believe it. The society. It's the society. Don't believe the society. And then the way he can flip, especially in that scene with Jomon when he's confronting him, where he's like, "That's why you don't mess with me." After he shoots him first, right in the neck. In
the neck, yeah.
And then how Jomon reacts, like his face, where he just can't believe that his brother has taken that cracker and moved up the hill, and he just slowly watches what he knows is going to happen. And that also shocked me, where I was just like, okay, he's going to die now, right? Of course he's going to die. The actual incendiary nature of his death was wild. But then every single one of Joji's plans, not one of his plans does not come with a caveat, right? So he poisons his father. Okay. Well, where did he hide the evidence? Well, he hid it down by that fishing pit, where the water was.
Yes.
And then he's got to burn it, because if the evidence is there, then somebody's going to find it. And then he starts burning the net above the fishing pit. And then he gets caught by Jomon eventually because of that. And then after Jomon catches him and he kills Jomon, then his corpse goes to be examined. And then they discover the air gun pellets, which ultimately lends to all of his demise. Like, it's so Drishyam 2, Makundi Uni and Associates, all of these movies that we've watched, the ability to button up every single potential loose end is staggering. And the screenwriters from that entire film industry get a gigantic round of applause from me.
Oh, yeah.
Because you cannot walk away from this movie going, well, that necessarily, you know what? He won there. He didn't win ever. That might be my one flaw with the movie. There was never a moment of him actually being kind of in control or being king, other than, him sitting at the table and him trying to convince his family that he's a good guy by being like, you can stay here. Even though like this is the rule of how all of dad's property should be disseminated, you can stay here. He does that because he wants them close, because he doesn't want them asking questions. So those moments are, fleeting, and they're few and far between, but that is a very small nitpick for what is absolutely a stunningly achieved and realized story. It's just gorgeous.
Definitely.
in the fact that from the moment he kills his father, he doesn't get a moment to breathe because everything is trying to protect himself and it all falls apart. And the way that it's shown, the way that it's depicted is breathtakingly wonderful, anxiety-inducing, and spectacular.
Definitely, man. It's like, no, you're right. He doesn't ever get that moment where he's sort of the king for any moment of time. It's like small little flashes. Like, I think he's having a conversation with the brothers. And because of when they start talking about the autopsy or something like that, he says something and he decides, we'll split it up like this and I'll give you this money to take care of this. And then I think the Dr. Felix says something like, oh, you really impressed me this time.
Yeah, like you did good this time.
You really stepped up. Yeah. So there's small little moments because like he's so deprived of any, agency or any sort of goodwill towards him. Like he's so beaten down the whole time. A small thing like that just props him up so much. And you see the scenes with him sitting at the table when they're playing with the drones and stuff like that. He seems like he's the king of he feels like for a very small amount of time when his father's not there, he's got a taste of what it feels like to be on top. But it's never substantiated because his plans there's always something in the way of his sinister sort of plans. But yeah, man, again, coming back to just that shot, how they shot the scene with the Jamun dying, basically. My God, like screenwriters, the people in the production behind the camera, fantastic, man. Like the way they shoot these scenes to pull you back as we're sort of following the cracker around with Joji, and it pulls us back all the way, and then we just see the faces of him and the face of Jemon, and you just can get everything out of that scene just in that. And then when he throws it, that's probably the most dramatic moment in the entire movie, and it's just like, whoa. It just stuns you into silence because you had this explosion, complete silence, just bask in it, just find out what's happened. And there's no zoom ins to like a gory face or anything like that or body parts gone. There's just this leg around the corner, which you're kind of like, wait, what? Did he actually, where's the body? At the start, I was like, did he actually die or did he survive? Is he going to come back? Later on, you find out he's gone. But the way they did that is so delicately well done that it's not over the top. It's completely in line with the tone of the movie, which is, nothing's over the top. Even that scene, everything's just in between the lines. Like there's nothing too high, nothing too low. You're just stuck in the middle. The middle is a dark place, but that's all it sort of is. So man, and again, the music on top of that, fantastic. It is masterfully done. I think that scene is so well done. There's so many scenes like that actually in this movie.
As you were talking about it, that's what I thought. It felt very Spielberg. The moment that you notice that he's pulling that cracker away, there's a version of this movie where you could have seen Jomon literally explode and there could have been blood and guts and viscera everywhere. We could have seen the father die. We could have seen him choke. We could have seen what happens to Joji later on in the movie. We don't see any of that. All we see is Joji's face as he reacts to what he just did and how he's going to have to work to make it seem like he didn't do it. And every single time that he gets that facial expression of like, it's compounding. It's exponential. So each time that facial expression hits, you can see the anxiety and the absolute claustrophobia in his mind compound so deeply that later on we get the scene where he realizes he had even left one of the pills after he had killed his father, just right on the floor in his bedroom. Like he had been sloppy the whole time, but his own hubris doesn't let him see that because he's hyper-focused on this. I can't let anyone know I did this. I can't let anyone know I did this. Let's make people believe that Jomon is a true alcoholic. I need to start making sure that Bincy is in on this because that was another thing I really, truly appreciated about the movie. You had brought it up earlier. She is the Lady Macbeth, but in my favorite adapted version of it, where she's aware of what's happening and it's only her looking away that is her complicit, that makes her complicit. She sees it, right? Like, so we see her in the one scene where he swaps out the medication and she happens to be in the next room, looks at Joji and walks away. And I kept looking for a scene where she would say out damn spot, and we don't get that. But we do get the one scene where she's walking by the laundry and she's like, make sure you don't put the whites with the colors. And I thought that was like a really clever little twist on it. and kind of a nod, but not necessarily saying like, I'm going to wash my hands. Like we've seen that.
Correct.
It's like Batman's parents dying. We don't need to see it again, Hollywood.
100 times. Yep.
We know they did it, So I appreciated those things, but her little chat that she has at the end of the movie when, the family realizes that she knew what Joji was doing. And she's just like, didn't you say you wanted him dead too? Like no one gets what they want, but Joji least of all. Joji is going to have to actually live with his own inadequacies for the rest of his life without being able to do anything about it from now on. And that was that was the final twist of the knife. So the lack of gore and the underpinning of all of his anxiety and emotion is what really made this sing. It could have been a bloodbath. Instead, it was a fascinating, as you keep saying, character study in how one person's ambition can absolutely make them crumble under the own weight of what they don't even know that like you get a taste of. It's Icarus. That's what it is. Like you fly too close to the sun, your wings are going to burn up.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just great. Just great.
Yeah. No, it's the kind of movie that, you're right. Anyone that really appreciates cinema, I think, is just going to fall in love with this movie because, the parts we talked about just then, the character study along with the production value and everything like that, all the technical elements of sound, as well as the writing and the references. It is so stunning, man. I was so impressed by this movie. You're right. They never really even leaned into it. They could have shown Jamon even with like a face that's like, exaggerated. Nope. No zoom ins, nothing. He's been shot in the neck, so he can't even respond. Like, I don't know if these things are thought of while they're doing it. They must have been, because it's just like, it's so well put together. It's like they're doing something like, why would he not react in a, more extravagant way? Well, it's because he's been shot in the neck, so he can't. So, and it's more the feeling of shock rather than anger. So there's so many things that they've done in this movie that are so good, man.
One scene in particular that I loved was right after, I think it was like the night after the father had died, and Vincey knows what had been going on. And there's that scene where you just see a lit door and you see Vincey walk through and she turns it on and Joji is sitting there in the room and you hadn't been able to see him previously. And those are the moments I appreciated so much in this movie. It knew it had one location primarily to work with, and boy, did it. Every single shot serves the ultimate message, which is, if you try to get what you want by this means, you will absolutely destroy yourself in the process. Yeah. And it just constantly, cinematically, beautifully worked to shrink the world until we finally get to a door closing and seeing blood trickle underneath it. Because that is how that story is going to end. And every single camera move ultimately gets us there. And I'm sure if I went back and watched it more and more and more and more, I would start to be able to show like the crane shots and the bird's eye view become less and less and less throughout the movie. Eventually we just get to that spot until we know what happens to Joji, and then we explode back out because now we're looking at a broken kingdom.
Correct. Yeah. Now that juxtaposition between, starting the movie off with a lot of sort of crane shots, sort of, oh my God, I could say some beautiful scenery in this movie. Oh my God. The rubber plantation or pineapple plantation, whatever sort of farm they sort of have, the land that they have, the way they zoom and they just see it, one is just stunningly beautiful. So again, getting you captured towards this movie, you see that, you're like, whoa, like, Amazon, I think we said before, just keep throwing your money at these Malayalam movies because they know how to use the money.
Give them everything.
Yep. Give them all this money during COVID where everything's locked down and they can just make this masterpiece in their house and just use whatever they have to. But whatever means they can. But the production looks so sharp and so crisp. But the contrast between, you're right, we see things from top, big world, but we're living in this tiny little house of really just a couple of rooms. There's some scenes in hospital, there's some scenes in like the well or whatever that is, but mostly it's just inside the house. So that contrast was so great. It's just little pieces that put this movie together, which create something, create this atmosphere that they've sort of done in this movie. So yeah, man, pretty impressed by this movie. It's definitely high up there, man. I don't even know what more to sort of say about it. I guess I don't know if you had any favorite scenes of this movie. Was it that one with that you just mentioned, or what was the scene that really took you away? I think.
I mean, I think it can't really be pinned down to one scene, but it would be any time that we were focusing on Joji's face after he realized that there was another thing that he would have to do. So like when the camera would be facing up at him, when he would be reading the news articles directly after a scene where we had seen one of the brothers uncover, because both of the brothers uncover that Joji hadn't told the full truth at some point, right?
Yes.
So Jomon originally, when he, approaches Joji and he's like, hey, he said he saw you coming out of the well at in slow motion. And Joji discovers that stuff. So the scene right after where his brother's like, come on, let's go get that guy. Let's go confront him and figure out what the truth is. And he walks away from the window and Joji tries to get the gun real fast. And he's like, you won't need that. Like he just keeps coming back to it. The way the film so effortlessly immediately paid off on, I did a thing, I'm good. And then 2 seconds later, here comes one of the characters to be like, no, I'm going to throw some mud in your plan. So every time we look up at him, or when he's Googling something, for instance, when he's Googling about the autopsy for Jovan, and he just sees like, or he knows that people are downstairs, and the way that his face changes subtly. So he walks into that room, hey, what's everyone doing? And the way they're all like, you need to get out of here.
Yes.
You need to get out of here. And then he tries to which is such a, it is the biggest snake in the grass move to be like, oh, they're going to need the gun. Well, we should go find the gun. And then he tries to grab the pellets, the air gun pellets off the table. And they're like, leave them. Those moments where he is the most despicable snake in the grass character and his entire family knows it. And they're finally presented with enough evidence to be able to convict him within their own family circle, and they're shocked by it, right? They know, but they're still so taken aback by it. They can't believe the extent to which he became that snake in the grass. That, coupled with his acting, hands down the favorite part. You can't pick one moment because it is consistent throughout the film.
Yeah. Definitely, man. No, it's a lot of really good scenes. I think the one you mentioned then with him, when they sort of find out and he walks past and he tries to act innocent, like, oh, you guys are meeting? What's going on? And they're like, no more games. No more games. We know what's happening now.
What are you guys doing here?
It's like, oh, a family meeting? Yeah. It's, those scenes are really good. But what I also liked, and I think it's got to do with the pacing quite a bit, was just how it sort of approached, systematically how things are getting worse and worse, and how he deteriorates worse and worse. We get more of those Googling frantically scenes later on when things are getting really bad. We get him sort of lying his way through more and more. I think my favorite might have been, because obviously the most explosive, literally, is the explosion scene. That's the one that you can probably remember if there's any from that, because it's just so
it's visceral
big in nature. The biggest, it's the biggest scene that there is. But the other one that really got me was when he comes back and he's telling the story to everyone about the police and how they came and they told him about what happened. And he's just lying consistently throughout it. And even the workers behind him, who aren't even central characters, but they're like, should we call the police? Should we do this? Should we do that? And they're like, no. He's saying no. And you realize that his story is becoming weaker and weaker, and it's being seen by more and more people. And it's just it's almost like the start of the end. That's a part where because later on you find out everyone is against him, with Jamon and Jason. They know how he's done and they're completely not on his side. But before then, just one moment where he's lying, especially Jason, because I think Jamon was against him, but Jason had not fully, gone against him at that point. And obviously all the other characters, Dr. Felix and the priest and everyone, were not against him because he's still sort of buttering up to them. He's like, I'm going to become a man of God now.
Yeah, that was my favorite. I literally, when he clung the Bible to his chest at the one point, and he was like, they can say whatever they want. I answer to a higher power now. That was the part where I legit laughed out loud. Because I've known people like that in my life. I have known a Joji. A couple. And luckily it's only a couple because there are those people that just sometimes walk into your life and you could tell, like, what do you want from me? What are you trying to get from me? And he so cleverly and convincingly played that like those people in my life that were my Jojis immediately popped to mind. You know, I won't say their real names, but
of course
it just immediately hit you with that. But him clinging that Bible, I answer to a higher power now, was like, spot on, man.
Something about it where is completely disingenuous. Obviously because of the backstory, but even if you didn't, even if you didn't see any of the scenes, the way he's showing that off, you could tell he's not being straightforward. You can tell he's completely lying about this sort of just to get his way around. But yeah, man, it was so much to like about this movie. I'm really looking forward to reading anyone's comments.
Real quick before that, another great favorite scene was when the father actually died. So, I touched on it loosely earlier that we don't actually see the father die. But what we do see is Joji down in that pit with that fishing pole. And hearing the sound, like the sound design in the movie was gorgeous. And just hearing the sounds from outside the pit and him just slowly putting the fish hook back on the rod, slowly setting that down. Like he does everything so methodically and slow. It was perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
Like that was the moment I knew that we weren't going to end up with gore, right? Like all of our gnarly, nasty feelings that we would get from this movie would just come from his facial expressions and the lengths he's willing to go to try to save himself, which ultimately bear no fruit. But that scene also stuck out to me.
Yeah, no. And it's funny, that scene. It's almost like he has this air of confidence about him when he's doing it, like he's achieved something. But later on, we find out that's one of the reasons that got him caught. Like his slow motion walking out is, so again, he's completely incompetent in what he's trying to do. He's just somebody with this dark ambition to sort of be the head of the house. But just, hey, man, power corrupts. And that's what this movie shows us. Almost better than any other movie that I can remember in recent times. It is such a dark tale, man. But yeah, man, I think we're touching on it a little bit because we've talked about Macbeth in bits and pieces here. But like, funnily enough, in the trivia that we read before, this wasn't the screenwriter for this movie. Sion Pushkaran never actually read the book. He didn't read the screenplay at all. So obviously, I think he's taken a lot of the broad strokes, the themes that were there. But funnily enough, maybe it's because our minds are trying to piece things together. But we were definitely seeing references, and there was nothing obviously. I think direct or anything like that. There wasn't like, a wash my hands of blood scene or anything like that, any of the really extravagant ones in
no, like I was not born of a woman, there was no like person that was carved out of somebody's womb or anything. Like that's what I appreciated about it though. And we had briefly discussed right before we hit record, because when you adapt, you want to make sure that, especially if you're setting it in like a very specific culture in a very specific time around a very specific world instance like COVID, it's going to take that story. And if you aren't familiar with the source material, make it seem brand new and fresh to you, or you have to look at it so broadly that you can see the stuff if you were like squinting, right? And that's what this one did really well. Obviously, Macbeth and the king were there, right? And murder. Like we got all those pieces.
Yes.
Right. But I thought of two other adaptations that did that particularly well. And one of them in Hollywood is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Where they had adapted Homer's The Odyssey into that very Southern, very songy, like the music is a huge thing in that movie. And it's just, 1920s, 1930s, I think is when it takes place. So it has no connective tissue with the original source material, but if you look for it all, you can see it. Obviously one of the main ones is John Goodman as the Cyclops. But the other one, and this may make you laugh, but it did a really great job adapting as well, was 10 Things I Hate About You, adapted Taming the Shrew. And in that movie, there are direct, like at one point, one of them is dressed like Shakespeare. Sometimes they even say direct lines from the play. But when I was a kid, I had no idea that was Taming the Shrew.
No.
And I had a lot of women cousins that had me watch that movie a lot. And it's funny as hell. I love that movie to this day, right? It's a lot of fun. But that's the true core nature of an adaptation like that is you could be divorced entirely from the source material and still enjoy yourself. And I think you absolutely can do that here. So if you're not familiar with Macbeth at all, don't worry. But if you are, there's a lot of really cool stuff in here that you can absolutely draw linear comparisons back to the play in.
Definitely right. And you can always go back and check out Macbeth after that. Because you're right, like Macbeth was obviously big for people our age probably, because it was just something that was taught. I'm not sure if it still is or not. I'm not sure what is actually happening right now. But I think you had mentioned it before in one of our chats. You said something like it's a great adaptation, but at the same time, it feels completely original. And that's such a huge thing to do, especially for I guess for a movie where, you know, an international movie or a foreign movie where, like, you know, Macbeth was obviously, you know, King of England and all that stuff. So it's a completely different world. They're just taking those themes and put them across in this small little, like, not even, you can't even say town anymore. It's a house. Like, they've taken all those concepts and just put it into one little house and made like, yep, here it is. And this is what it would be like in our world. So it just felt so original, but at the same time, so close to the source material.
Yeah.
It's such a fantastic job of balancing those two, where I felt like I never felt like this was an overt reference to Macbeth, but I never felt like this movie strayed away so far from the source material that they're doing stuff that's outside of the original, you know, inspiration. That to me is what you call a great adaptation. And that's what this movie really is. Like, you know, hate to say it, but like Hollywood right now is big into adaptations. Like, they love based off a true story, based off a book, based off a comic. If you're going to go somewhere in Hollywood, take a look at this. This is one way to do it. And it is fantastic. Like this.
Yeah. Well, that's what I would love to see more of. Like, that's what Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is so successful in. Like, it adapted something that is so broad and old, and the themes are huge. And like, it's one of those things where you're like, oh man, yeah, I know that story about the ships, and I think there's a Cyclops in it. That's cool. But you try to sit down and read it, and you're like, oh, this is a totemic odyssey. So here, give me 2.5 hours of something very entertaining that can remind me of themes and stories that have existed for time immemorial, as far as we're concerned.
Definitely.
The way that this is handled and the way that this is presented is unquestionably one of the best adaptations I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Because it so thoroughly captures the heart of what the Macbeth story is, but so uniquely does it, and through such a different lens than you could have ever expected. Because when you told me initially, check out Joji, it was supposed to be based on Macbeth, and I saw the original image, right? Like the one of Joji just wearing the headphones. I'm like, this?
Correct.
That was my gut reaction. Like, this movie, the guy with the headphones, really? I could not have been more wrong. Because don't judge a book by its cover.
No.
The content in here is spectacular, and it is visceral and explosive, literally on one hand, but it's explosive emotionally. It will absolutely rip the cinematic heart out of you and put it back in. Because on the one hand, you hate to see a tragedy, but on the other hand, you love to see a beautifully filmed story that so thoroughly achieves what it strives to. And Joji did that almost from the first second all the way up until that. I had no idea there was going to be the little post credit thing, right? Like, we get the end title and then we get the little send off, and that just the implication of that. The implication of that he will just be sitting there forever.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Man. The parallels between him and his father, what happened, right? There's all kinds of stuff you can make out of this movie. It's definitely a movie. If I watch this movie again, I'm sure I'll have a completely different perspective. Well, not completely different, a more layers to my perspective, I guess, because it is that kind of movie where I'm sure they've packed in so many things. But yeah, man, fantastic. Before we sort of move on to some detail, I will give some shout outs, because this movie has actually been requested quite a bit from our audience here, man. It's so obviously it's very popular, and I think it was a movie that was pretty big in terms of the streaming platform. So, you know, obviously came out during COVID. So it didn't get a big theatrical release. Like, I mean, this movie probably deserved to get a theatrical release, because imagine seeing this movie in the cinema and because obviously there's no big CGI or anything like that, but how intense it is to be in a room full of people with complete silence and just seeing this being drawn out. My God, that would have been one hell of an experience. Like, that would have just been, you would have walked out just like looking next to each other, like, what did we just watch?
Yeah,
now? Like,
I would pay $10 to go see this in the theater tomorrow, and I just watched it at home. Like, if my local theater said, "Hey, we're going to be screening Joji," I will
Yep.
pay. I'll even pay the
Yep.
convenience fee to buy the ticket right now and then go see it in the theater. Like, I don't care. That was great.
Definitely. Yeah. So, but I think in terms of, it was the kind of movie that was put out on Amazon. One of the first real big blockbuster movies during that time, because we saw a lot of movies going direct to streaming because of the inability to go to the cinemas. But big shout outs to a few people, man. Abhishek recommended this a while ago. Vishal, SJ, Johans, and Ardash. I think you guys have in the comment section quite often. So really appreciate this suggestion. Honestly, thank you so much for this suggestion.
Thank you.
This movie.
From me, thank you.
This movie was let's get straight on with that disco, man. I'm looking forward to seeing where you sort of rank this, man. Could this be the magical dope? Could this make it to that number? What do you think of this movie, man?
Yeah, it was a dope.
Yeah.
Yep, straight up dope. If I can put on something that so thoroughly engages me that I don't want to check my cell phone, I don't want to tap into anything else, and I've got stuff going on. Like, I'm a little busy right now. I do narrations and voiceover stuff, and a lot of that stuff just kind of like will chatter in my mind. And if I put on a movie I'm familiar with, usually I'm thinking about that and passively enjoying that. I actively enjoyed every moment of this movie. So full dope, 100%. I could not stop thinking about it. And I also want to give a very special shout out to my buddy Andy Bird, who sent us a really great plot summary of Macbeth, because we wanted to see, whether or not we should really dig deep into that comparison. And you don't have to. Just know that, like, Macbeth killed his dad and then had to kill other people to stop anybody knowing that he killed his dad. And then ultimately that leads to his own death. Like, great.
Pretty much.
Joji. Yeah. So yes, full dope. What did you think?
Oh yeah, I'm right there with you, man. This is a 10 out of 10 perfect dope movie, man. We've seen a lot of Malayalam movies, and especially myself, I've seen a lot now, but in terms of like, they're all really high quality and all the stuff is there in terms of its production quality, and it's, different things. But this movie, the fact that it's an adaptation is something I've not really seen. And with just that title card at the start, inspired by Macbeth, got me pretty excited to just see, like, what are they going to do? What is their vision? You had put it like, your favorite flavor of ice cream and served to you differently or something like that. Like, what do you think of this? And it's like, whoa. So I already love the original story of Macbeth, and you've shown me something that's so great, so well done, so original and so unique and breathtaking in terms of its cinematography, breathtaking in terms of acting. This movie, like, I don't know how I can not give this a perfect 10 out of 10. It is so good. It's a movie that after I watched it, I was like, whoa, you get that experience of like, what have I just watched? This was incredible on so many levels. I was genuinely excited to talk to you about this movie on this podcast because I was just like, I have to get these thoughts out. So
I know this may be the most cagey you and I have been back and forth before like a pre-show discussion, because it was that like, I watched the movie. I will talk to you tonight. There's just, but again, I kind of struggled with that. Like, I have so much to say, I can't think of anything to say, but I loved it. It just is. If you've been on the fence about it, and you are maybe in the camp like you and I had discussed, we noticed that there are some critical reviews that aren't as favorable, or maybe they're fan reviews. I don't know. Star ratings. We'll just put it in a star.
Yes.
Drishyam and Drishyam 2 had much higher star ratings than this movie did. Not much higher, but higher. And we had discussed that maybe that was because this was a dour movie in a dour time, and maybe people wanted a bit more escapism. Well, now that we're a little bit removed from the dourness of that time, if you haven't given this movie a shot, absolutely do it. Yeah. If you're a fan of cinema, if you like the way shots are framed, if you love seeing actors just absolutely dissolve into a role, this movie's got everything you need. It is one of the most effective resurgences of a story set in a modern time with modern circumstances, but in a completely different culture than you've ever seen that story set that I've ever seen. Just stunning.
Absolutely, man. It is absolutely fantastic. If you are on the fence, definitely. You are right. It is, I think movies like Drishyam and some of the other movies we have seen are not as even though there's death and murder and all that, those movies, the tone and everything is not as dark as this one. There's something sinister in this one. There's pure evil almost, it feels like, in this movie, which is something that a lot of people will just be like, no, it's not for me. And if that's completely fine as well. If you don't want to see that, that's no judgment at all. But if you are somebody that just appreciates sort of writing and sort of acting in its purest form, that's what we saw in this one. Acting in its purest form, just completely go into this character on multiple levels, just like so subtly and so well done, so nuanced in the performance. It's so fantastic, man. I have to give this one a 10 out of 10. Fantastic, dope. This is, one of my favorite movies I've seen, man. So again, thank you everyone to recommend us. Thank you to Andrew Bird. I really appreciated reading that synopsis before going in, because it just got me even more hyped.
Yeah. That was the coolest thing for me, was just like, all right, yeah, I do love this story. I love this story. Yeah. And there's like, that just speaks to the themes of Macbeth, having existed now for 400 plus years. It just timeless. Like, we love a tragedy so long as the circumstances surrounding that tragedy are compelling. And boy, did they find a way to do it here. I cannot recommend it enough to you. Just go watch it. Even if you've seen it, go watch it again, because I'll probably watch it at least 2 or 3 more times.
Definitely. So maybe I'm going to chuck on probably a bit later on as well, just to sort of reflect on it. This director, man, Dileesh Pothan, just want to give him a special mention. Fantastic, man. I think I've already seen a movie of his previously with Fahadh Faasil, which was also fantastic. But this movie sort of takes it another level, I think. So fantastic stuff from him. I'm really looking forward to see. I hope they do more adaptations like this of classic, literature. Like get them onto some Dostoevsky or something like that. Get them on a movie like that. That would be insane if they did.
Do like a
Homer,
a Charles Dickens. Do like a Charles Dickens. Give me the Malayalam Christmas story.
Yeah. I mean, if there's any industry that will do
Christmas Carol,
it'd be the
you know what I'm talking about.
Yes. Any industry would be the Malayalam film industry, because Christianity is a big thing in Kerala, as we're sort of seeing more and more. But I think that'll do it for us. Again, thanks to everyone for listening to the podcast. Thank you for listening to the review. Doug, absolute pleasure. Honestly, one of my favorite reviews I think we've done since we've even started recording.
I have such a good time doing this. Thank you all for listening. And thank you again for, first off, inviting me on the show in the first place and introducing me to this film industry, because it is a absolute wonderful breath of fresh air. It's not just a breath of fresh air. It feels like kicking the door open on a brand new planet. It's so wonderful.
Awesome, guys. We'll definitely catch you soon then. Catch you.
We'll see ya.
See you, everyone.